Welcome to episode 20 of the Frograck Podcast. For many of us involved in the amphibian hobby, breeding the animals we keep is an important part of their captive husbandry. With the production of offspring comes the need to find them new homes. For many of us, this experience of producing and selling becomes a rewarding part of the hobby that we want to manage and grow. Providing healthy captive bred animals to other hobbyists, justifying the time we spend on the hobby, and generating some income that can support our animal husbandry lifestyle. But you might guess that there are levels to this. From simply moving a few captive bred dart frogs to new homes, filling half your basement with 100, 150 terrariums, or even selling frogs as a primary source of income. If you as a keeper are anywhere along this spectrum, and let's admit it, you probably are, there are a lot of factors to consider when selling live animals becomes a part of your amphibian hobby. Today's guest has decades of experience at all stages of this progression. He brings to today's conversation a lot of wisdom and encouragement. While Wally isn't known for frogs because he's more of a gecko guy, you'll soon find out why he was at the top of my list of people to have this conversation with. Wally Kern of Supreme Gecko, welcome to the Frograck Podcast.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for joining. It's a pleasure. It really is a pleasure. Thanks.
Well, you recently had Alex on to talk fruit flies, and so I know that mentally you're plugged into the amphibian hobby, even if you don't have a basement full of frogs yourself. But why don't you help my audience, who may not have migrated over to the gecko side of YouTube in the last few years, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about who you are in the hobby and how you came to be a gecko breeder?
Love to. I'm going to jump way back. This is 100 years ago or so. It feels like 100 years for me. I started I can remember this very well. As a 13-year-old, my parents moved out of the big city into the country because of some school problems that I got into. So we moved out to the country and we moved right next to this little creek, and it was just perfect for me. I could play hockey on the ponds that would freeze over in the wintertime, and in the summertime, I was always down at the creek collecting tadpoles or crayfish or whatever I could find, and just bringing them home and putting them in a little tank and watching. Escalated from, a teenager into my early 20s, and I kept a couple of fish tanks, not tropical fish, but game fish. I love to watch, and I started getting into fishing. Love to watch the fish interact. And it was funny because I had a bluegill and a bass. I thought, oh, this bass is going to grow up and eat this. And the bluegill just dominated the tank. So that interesting behavior just stuck real hard for me. In my later 20s, I joined Milwaukee Aquarium Society, and I started growing my tropical fish hobby, focusing on cichlids and live bearers and killifish and cichlids. And we went from, I think we had 10 tanks when I had an apartment. We bought a house. My wife would look at the kitchen and the bedrooms. I would look at the basement. I'm interested in let me run down to the basement. So, we bought a small house in Milwaukee, went from, the 10 tanks or 12 tanks that we had over to 125 tanks. 125 gallon was my biggest with discus. And we were breeding and actually took that into a business. This is, again, back 35, 40 years ago when the internet really wasn't out there. Everything was hard copy. And took that into a business. I was importing from Europe and bringing in shipments from Africa and shipping all over the United States. So that was my introduction into the business world from a hobby. We had 3 boys, and at that time it became career, family, or business. I could choose 2. I couldn't choose all 3 because it was just way too much time. So, the family was there for forever, and I loved my career as an IT person. And the fish had to go. We had our last son, and he had a medical issue, and I was at the hospital for a week with my wife. And I came home one day, and I had discus on their sides. I had brought in a imported fish and wasn't careful and spread it to many, many tanks. And I literally packed up everything in one weekend and sold 125 tanks and a big blower and all the fish. I was done. Come another 10 or 15 years, and I got that itch again. Got into orchids big time. That didn't really do anything for me because I couldn't breed them. I love seeing the babies. Kept orchids for about 5 or 6 years, got out of orchids, and then got into reptiles. Oh, that's a cool leopard gecko at a reptile show. Purchased a couple of leopard geckos. Next weekend, purchased a couple of crested geckos. Super easy to take care of, super easy to breed. Now, that's the key for me.
Yep.
And then the next year, I went from, 2 or 3 reptile tanks to 20 or 30. And I'm all the way up to right now, my gosh, 800 enclosures that I'm working through. And this is my full-time job. 7, 8 years ago, I retired. And I thought, well, I can, do this reptile thing and supplement the income that I was making before. And within 2 years, 3 years, I was right back to the same income. So it wasn't a far jump for me to do that. The key, though, is I never, ever, ever, and we'll talk about this later, I'm sure. The key, though, was it was never oh, I can make money with this and look at the market and I can do this and that. It was always, that's a cool animal. I want to learn more about that. And oh my gosh, I bred it, and now what do I do with the babies? And then examining the market and, looking for how to sell the animals and marketing and PR and, websites and all of that stuff. So I've gone this route from a hobby to a business, and I'm enjoying the business part almost as much as the hobby part. I still going down to the incubator every single day, first thing in the morning, and opening it and seeing a baby, any baby, whether it's common or super, super rare in the hobby, ignites the same fire that it did, 20 some years ago when I started reptile keeping. And I've said this so many times that I feel bad about saying it again, but for your viewers, the very first day that I walk downstairs, I see a baby and I say, oh, I've got to set up a new tank, or where do I put this, or how am I going to get, I don't have time. I'm done.
Yep.
I'm absolutely done with the hobby because every single time I look at a baby, it's like, this is so cool. I get to do this every single day.
Yeah, man, there's a lot I can relate to in that story. For me, it was wood frog tadpoles in kindergarten was the first, like, absolutely fascinating. And they were in my kindergarten classroom. And like on day one that the teacher brought the tadpoles in, every single kindergartner has some level of interest and fascination. But for me, like, I couldn't wait to get to school every day to check on them. And so like I was a little bit more obsessed with them than all the other kindergartners at the time. And then like I said in my opening remarks, for those of us who really enjoy breeding as part of the hobby, it sends us down a different path than some other keepers do. I really admire people who keep fewer and single animals. Like, they're not worried about like having a pair of everything they keep, and they just really enjoy setting up a beautiful habitat and giving excellent care year after year to that animal. I personally don't relate to that, though. That's not where my interest lies. My interest lies, if I want something, I want a group. Like with amphibians, it's usually more than a pair, it's a group. And I want to make sure I have males and females, and I want to see if I can provide the husbandry I need to get them to the point where they breed. For some reason, that seems like, a goal in husbandry is to see if they can reproduce. And then the last thing I'll say is for years I kept dart frogs. For maybe 10 years I kept dart frogs, and they were very rewarding because they consistently give you a small amount of offspring almost year round. Whereas a lot of other amphibians, a bunch of offspring, like tree frogs, for example, a bunch of offspring all at once in the spring, and then you spend the year raising them. And I've missed having dart frogs. I haven't had them now for about 10 years. And I just miss, like what you say, every day you can check for eggs, not just in April and May, but almost year round. You could be checking for eggs and seeing if any tadpoles have metamorphosed. It's really a rewarding part of the hobby for me too.
We're like on the same mindset, 100%. I can't look at something and go, oh, it's a male. How am I going to find a female? It's a female. How am I going to find a male? I have to have a group. I have to have a group of 4 or 5 to start, young ones to start off with, to try to get that pair. Or I'm just going to bite the bullet and here's the money. Take my money. Let me get a pair of these animals. My mindset had to shift several years ago, probably about 3 years ago, to, wait, people just keep single animals now. I don't get it. I don't get it, but I'll sell a single animal. So it was a hard concept for me to understand, which was out there forever, in the hobby, obviously. People want to keep one dart frog and enjoy that and enjoy
Yep.
the setup, creating the terrarium, creating the display tank. But that was something I couldn't, it took me a long time to wrap my mind around the fact that people display these animals and share that bond with the animals, unlike me. And I have a bond with the animals, but for me, when I was keeping fish,
Mm.
it was all about setting it up so I can number one, manage and clean and support the animals and make sure they're healthy and everything. And then setting it up so that I get babies. There
Yeah.
was no, I want to aquascape and put a skeleton and a skull in here and a dog with a helmet. There was none of that whatsoever for me.
Yep.
So we're the same.
So tell me, nowadays, what are you busy doing? You mentioned the size of your gecko collection, so you're breeding, you're marketing and selling somehow, and I also know you because you're very prolific on YouTube. So give me an idea of the different things that Supreme Geckos keeps you busy doing.
I don't even know where to begin. I really don't. So I'll kind of explain my process a little bit. And, this is going to sound boring to some people, but this is the process that I had to kind of work through to be able to manage what we're doing. And I tell you what, folks, when I talk about 750, 800 enclosures, that's a lot of grow out enclosures, but it's also a lot of display enclosures and it's a lot of different enclosures. So my days basically go down, check for babies. That's the fun
Yep.
part because that's something that I want to do right away. And then check to make sure everybody is okay. Make sure that I didn't leave one of the enclosure doors open and 23 geckos are roaming around on the floor. And then just a basic check, half hour, 45 minutes about in the morning. Then I come upstairs and I look on social media and I answer questions, lots of questions. So we get this is going to sound weird, but we probably get about 20 to 25 questions a day about
Hmm.
just care, not sales related, but just care. And where do I find information about? And so that's another probably half hour to 45 minutes of doing that. Then I get into the sales mode and I start posting on Facebook and Instagram and start thinking about my next YouTube. We do both shorts and we do long form YouTube videos. So I'll plan that a little bit. At some point, I might start doing research. I have notes here, on researching some of the animals and learning more. Every day is a learning experience. I never, ever, 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 ever stop learning. And then usually in the afternoons, we either it depends on the day. Like today we have shipping. So I'll be packing animals and doing the shipping for probably about 3 or 4 hours today. We've got a lot of boxes. The weather
Yep.
here in Wisconsin just broke and we have a lot of shipments going out today. Some days, some afternoons, and I'm talking about 3 or 4 hours in the afternoon, it's feeding, it takes me, if I were to do all of the animals in one day, it would probably be the whole day of feeding. So I try to break that down a little bit. Some days are YouTube videos. I sit down and I do the script and the recording, the editing, the posting, little short clips and stuff like that for the YouTube videos. That might be another day. Usually I try to put out our YouTube videos on a Wednesday. So I'm usually recording either on a Monday or Tuesday and then editing on Wednesday. Thursday nights are our lives. We do a live every single Thursday night. Thursday morning then gives me pretty much the whole morning to look at the animals, to feed, to do some management, like moving animals around, setting their enclosures a little bit different. Works into Friday. Friday's really like my free day. People would say Saturday and Sunday, but I use Saturday and Sunday because my wife is here. She works special needs kids teaching. So she's here and she can help me with some other different projects where I need, four hands instead of two. And Sundays, sometimes family and a little bit of relaxation. But Friday is my day to just kind of go down and do projects downstairs, like set up a new rack system or something like that. So that's kind of my week. And it's scheduled like that because I don't want to miss a day of posting
Yep.
or, my feeding is kind of in here and I know what I have to feed in the next couple of days. So I plan around stuff like that too.
Nice. All right. And you're known in the community not just for, like I said, it's pretty prolific on YouTube, covering all sorts of stuff, live streaming, care videos, day in the life type videos, but also I think maybe you'd describe it as like one of the jewels in your crown of community building is the 12 Supreme Days of Christmas. Assume some of my audience in the frog world has never been involved in that. Can you give us just a broad overview of what that consists of?
Would love to. We just finished up 2025's 12 Supreme Days of Christmas, simply because my wife and I were both ill for 3 or 4 weeks, and we just had to stop the event and then restart it. So we've just finished that up, and we'll pick up the 2026 12 Supreme Days of Christmas coming up. We start like in September-ish in planning and organizing. And then by November, I'm collecting donations. Basically, the 12 Supreme Days of Christmas is a 12 or 13-day giveaway where we have donors come in and donate animals and reptile supplies, isopods, geckos, hedgehogs, snakes, all kinds of reptile related jewelry, art, millipedes, praying mantises, all kinds of different gifts. So people are probably asking, so, you get a couple of gifts a day and donate and do a giveaway. We had 2 years ago, we were at $35,000 in giveaways for the entire event. This year, I think we were at around, I don't even know, 30,
Yeah.
75 gifts, 375 gifts over 12 days to give away. I talk like one of those guys in the ad. I can do that. So we give away a lot of gifts every single day of the event. And the most important thing is, there's a lot of important things. Number one, it's all free for anybody that wants to jump in and participate and try to win a gift. Lots of people win gifts. There's no cost whatsoever, no shipping costs, no entry costs. You don't have to click and like, and you just have to fill out a form. And
Yep.
sometimes, I want this, and this gift, and what's your favorite part of the holiday season? And they have to answer a question. I make it interesting. I make it fun. The second big thing about the 12 Supreme Days of Christmas is that we have some amazing, mind-blowing donors. Last year, we had a couple of $1,000 gift certificates for geckos. A couple of years ago, we had if I remember right, $3,000 gecko donated. So we have an amazing set of donors. We have great participants as well. I just don't have the feeling like, hey, I didn't win today, I better win tomorrow. And most of all, here's the cool thing about the 12 Supreme Days of Christmas. This is so cool. I'll go on social media and I'll see a Facebook post. Hey, Julie, I saw you in the 12 Supreme Days of Christmas. I saw that you like to keep these animals. Can I ask you a question about that? And seeing this connection that I know people aren't connecting without the 12 Supreme Days of Christmas, it's the icing on the cake for me. It really is. This is a community. This is number one, bring a little cheer during the holiday season. But most importantly, it's bring the community together and have people talking to each other. We very much encourage in the chat during the 12 Supreme Days of Christmas, people talking to each other. And I ask the donors, come on 12 Supreme Days and share what animals you're keeping and start the conversation. So everything else, the key is that, we're trying to build the community in a positive way. Number two, we're trying to recognize good donors in this community that we have. And number three, we like to give away gifts to people, lots and lots and lots of gifts.
That's awesome. In the last few years, you've noticed that online live streaming auctions have become sort of they're popular. A lot of people are
Yeah.
spending time every day or each evening logging into various vendors' online live auctions. And I think that's popular because of the sense of community. Like you said, you might just be checking it out, but you're participating in a live stream. You're in the chat with all the other people who are there. Maybe you're looking for a good deal on a snake or a gecko or something, but it's an experience probably first and foremost, which I think is what 12 Supreme Days of Christmas is.
It's exactly that. And, I don't know if I want to name brands, but these auctions that are popping up, my mindset was for a long time, this is just an auction. Here's an animal. here's a supply, buy an animal, buy a supply. And my good friend Adam from Proper Royals Snakes, he does these live streams, and sometimes he doesn't sell an animal. And his intent is not to sell an animal. Watch me thaw out my mice to feed the snakes and ask questions. So he treats it just like a live stream on YouTube. And I think that that's super cool. And people will go into his shop and buy stuff from his shop, but his intent is to open the conversation and talk to people. And I need to wrap my mind around that as well and start doing some of these other auctions and do them more as an educational than a real sale.
Yeah. Well, you put out plenty of educational content, so don't sell yourself short.
Thanks.
But yeah, we'll get to a question later on when we're talking business about the importance of your online footprint or marketing, and it'll probably fall into that category. What similarities do you see between the gecko and the amphibian hobbies? Because I see a lot of overlap.
I see a lot of overlap as well. I think the biggest is, oh my gosh, there's so many. If we remove the word gecko or horse or fish, it's a community of sharing ideas. Hey, this worked for me. I want to set this up from a breeding standpoint. I've done this for a couple of years and it hasn't worked. How do I change this? Well, you need to look at this because this animal needs this requirement. I know frogs are different requirements for different species. The tiny thumbnails are different from the bigger frogs. Rain, we talked earlier about some of the other bigger frogs and having different requirements and different management, things going on. So I think it's a matter of sharing information independent of what animals we're keeping. I think it is also a way for people to connect and share their passions and kind of do a little, chest thumping and say, hey, look at my animal. It's super cool. And I have a passion about this, but I also have an attachment to this animal. So I think that there's a lot of that going on. I think, again, it's 99% positive, and every single hobby that you run into, you're going to get that 1% negative. Oh, you shouldn't keep it like that. That's too small of an enclosure. And it is what it is. You can't say the frog hobby or the gecko hobby is so toxic. There's always going to be people that kind of challenge that. But again, 99% positive. And just, you look on Facebook and you look on Instagram and all the sharing and positiveness there. I think that's kind of independent of whatever type of animal you're keeping.
Yeah. Could you describe, you've helped a lot of other hobbyists along in their journey. So I'm not only asking this from your experience personally, but from what you've seen amongst other people. Could you describe the growth path from starting as a hobbyist to becoming a breeder with a big collection? What sort of phases do people go through?
I think your frog just answered the question for me. So I'm just going to go. I completely agree 100%. So I think we've covered that. Here's what I look at, and I'm probably skipping some steps here, but for me, it was buy a gecko and then you buy an animal and then you might want a second animal or a third. And maybe it's different animals like we talked about before, but maybe it's the same animal. Maybe it's a male and female and you get your first, and this was, my gosh, this was so huge for me in fish with crebenzas. First babies, it was like game on, game on. I have a pair in a 10-gallon and they bred. Now I need, 19 more tanks. So you go through that transition of I have one or two. And now I have, 20 babies and I have some setups for the 20 babies and learning and researching connections. This person answered my question and helped me. This person wasn't so good as far as, didn't answer quickly or didn't give me a whole lot of information. So I'm going to pull this name and I'm going to store that. So you build up this networking and you build up your knowledge of the animals. So now you have, maybe 2 or 3 pair going and you have babies and different species. And what do I do with the babies? Oh my gosh, now what do I do? I can't keep them all. You could if you had enough space and money and time and lots of resources, but you need to start finding an outlet for those babies. So you check your local pet stores. Again, some of this is for reptiles, some of it is for other animals. You check your local pet stores. You don't post on Facebook because Facebook doesn't like that anymore. They used to. So, that's fine. Post whatever. Not anymore with animals. You go to Instagram and show pretty pictures of your animals and get people to say, "Hey, that's pretty cool. Do you have any, available?" Maybe you do some YouTube videos and spur some interest on there as well. Maybe you start doing reptile shows. I love reptile shows. We do 12 to 15 reptile shows a year, and we will never stop doing that because I can share the passion there. Maybe you jump on, again, trying to stay away from brand names, but some of the auction places, some of these sales places, and you post your animals there. There's a cost there. Maybe you do the free service. Eventually, maybe you get into creating your own website. Oh, I've got a website now. Now I can post care sheets and I can share the collection, the breeders, and I can have a little shop where you can buy, the animals. And if I'm buying, 2,000 deli cups at a time, maybe I'll start selling some deli cups to cover my costs with the deli cups. So you progress through this, and then as you're doing that progression, hopefully every single year, you're kind of looking at that and saying, okay, now I'm a business. Now I'm a business. I have my tax numbers. Now I want to kind of take it to the next step. I want to set up a goal. So I want to use spreadsheets and other apps. And I want to put together goals of what I'm going to budget for this year and what I plan to breed and what I plan to sell. Now, if you have that going on, now you have to start digging into the marketing aspect. And maybe you're watching dart frog videos on how to sell animals. Maybe you're watching, I don't know, how to sell shoes, because it's kind of the same thing from a sales and marketing standpoint. You dig into that a little bit. Maybe you're digging into how do I create better YouTube thumbnails to give a better presence online on social media. So you keep moving forward. You've got your core animals, you're building that, but you're also building this knowledge base of the animals' care and requirements. And believe me, over 20 years of keeping animals, every single day I look and think of a different way to keep the animals and maybe improve this or improve that. You also have to, if you're in this sort of business, you also have to hone your skills, sharpen the tools on things like marketing and sales and inventory control and shipping and all kinds of things like that. Keep in touch with your competitors. Keep in touch with, what's going on in the market, even though it might not apply to dart frogs or geckos. Mm-hmm. There might be something you can pull from that go, I can use that. I can emulate that ad and use it for my business.
Yep. Thanks. You covered a lot, and I'm going to ask a whole bunch of follow-up questions.
I thought I covered everything.
Yeah.
Everything you'd want to know.
A lot of people who experience rapid growth in the hobby, whether it's geckos or frogs, they get into the hobby, like you described, they discover they like it, they like the breeding aspect, more tanks, more species, more breeding. And let's assume, though, that they're doing all this as a hobby, and so they have a real job, a real career of some sort. One of two things can happen. I think the most typical path is they reach the point where it's not fun anymore. Like they grew too big, and now the daily chore requirements of everything you just described, basically running a small business on the side because it grew bigger than a hobby because you have animals to sell. So you have to, all the things you just described, you really have to engage in. And so they realize maybe it got too big, and through discernment, they whittle down their collection or they give up on it altogether. The other thing that they could do that I am more interested in is, what if they decide, well, my hobby's pretty big, but it's not big enough to be a full-time job, but I want to make that leap. So what does it look, what sort of things, what questions would someone ask themselves? What considerations would they need to do if they didn't want to dial back, but they wanted to go big or go home and maybe turn their hobby into a full-time job?
Outstanding perception of what can happen here. So let's cover number one. Don't think there is not a day in one of the weeks where I walk downstairs thinking, this is the greatest thing in the world. I'm the king of the world and I love what I'm doing. There's some days I'll walk downstairs and go, why am I doing this? This is silly. The 8 hours, 10, 11, 12 hours from, carrying and research and social media. Why do I keep doing this? I didn't sell anything this last week. How am I going to keep? So you're going to go through that cycle. You're going to go through burnout. You're going to go through the other extreme. Oh, I'm going to hire somebody. Am I going to, if I bring in more animals, am I going to bring some out and sell at reptile shows? Or how am I going to manage that? So planning helps a lot from that end. But at some point, you also have to just internally accept the fact that you're going to be burnt out. I'll say honestly, every month I'll go through maybe a day where, I'll get up and eat my Cheerios or Captain Crunch and just go, I just don't want to go downstairs right now. It's not what I want to do. And I'll sit on the couch and watch the Flintstones for an hour. Um, and then I'll get up and go, okay, I'm revigorated. I'm fine now. Accept that, personal forgiveness and move past it. We all
Yeah.
have to take breaks, whether it's an hour or two, whether it's the whole day. If mentally you're challenged, just take the break and forgive yourself.
Yeah.
Don't go downstairs. I'm the worst keeper in the. Don't do it for a week.
Yeah, right.
But if you need a break, do the break thing. Talk to somebody online. Know how you get that fire going again. For me, it's talking to my network of friends and looking at their pictures of geckos and going, I want to do that, and then get back into that mode again. That's my feeling, is that you're going to go through it, realize that you're going through it, take the break, get over it, and move on. Now, on the second part, it's making that transition into, getting bigger and better and having more animals. And how, if I remember the question right, it's how you make that transition, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the tough part. And again, planning helps you a whole lot. Again, I have spreadsheets, and I kind of, at the beginning of the year, I know the animals that should be breeding, and I put percentages of eggs hatching and blah, blah, blah. Okay, this is going to give me 4,653 babies, and I need to accommodate that. You just need to know, if you have enough resources to handle that, if you need to hire somebody, if you need, you know, your wife or your husband to help you with some of the chores of management. I'm so blessed. My wife does the shipping,
Mm.
100%. She does the shipping. She handles a lot of the hard goods that we have. We have a wall of hard goods that we're selling from, and she handles isopods. And I'll go in and I'll check and everything, but she does all the isopods, and she helps so much with the reptile show. So we have this division of power or
Yeah.
responsibilities, and that's the only thing that gets me through any of this. So I think that, as you're getting bigger and you're starting to produce more animals, the biggest thing is knowing that you're going to be in there before you get there, and have a plan. And that plan has to include knowing where your market is and knowing how you can how you can source out these animals to pet stores or reptile shows or online auctions or sales platforms. Do you need a website? Maybe you need to build a website. And websites are a dime a dozen now, and it doesn't take anything to put out a website, put your animals out there, and start selling and recoup the cost of a website. And
Yeah.
I have a big feeling that you should be involved without thinning yourself down too much. You should be involved with all of those, really, because there's certain aspects with every single one of them, different aspects with each one of them that have different abilities to sell animals. The key there is, getting back, long answer to your short question, is making sure that you know that you can move your animals. It doesn't make any sense at all. I'm going to use an example here to breed crested geckos or ball pythons right now. If you don't have a very, 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 very niche down, look at what you're breeding. I'm only breeding, just as an example, I'm only breeding red crested geckos, but I'm breeding the best red crested geckos out there. So that's my niche, and
Right.
that's where my audience is. That's where my market is. So if you're producing 200 animals, and at the end of the year you've sold 3, that's a problem. And you need to recognize that before you produce 200 animals.
Yep. Yep. I will say I'm really optimistic about the amphibian hobby currently in 2026. See overall that there's more demand than there is supply, and just like all of the herp hobby, it's steadily growing. Even though right now ball python and crested gecko people are concerned about the market because it's in a boom bust cycle. I don't see that in the amphibian side of things. So I hope a lot of my audience is considering breeding and selling animals and taking some of your advice to heart. Okay, so if you're really trying to expand your collection, it's going to take space. And let's assume we're only talking about in our homes. So like you and I have our animals in our basement. Other people in parts of the country that don't have basements are going to dedicate some sort of space, big rooms or bedrooms or a converted garage. So give me an idea on how to scale up from having like a few shelves of animals to a room of animals that is adequate for breeding. Do you have any tips, any advice you'd give to someone who's starting down that path, even just little setup and space efficiency ideas, and any at all, any advice at all about space?
I have done dozens of these interviews, and that's the very first time anybody has asked that. And that's in my wheelhouse 100%, because again, I'm a Tetris kind of person, and I like to play, the numbers on spreadsheets, and I guess that would be CAD CAM or something like that, where you can manage spaces. So I love doing this, but I kind of have to do it in my mind.
Yeah.
But again, it's all planning, and it's all, at some point, it's the beginning of the breeding season. Well, you better be thinking about how many babies you're going to be producing and how much storage space you need to. Storage space that's a terrible way to phrase that. How much space you need for enclosures.
Yeah.
And then plan ahead before you get to the point of, where am I going to put this new baby? My biggest thing is utilizing your space. And when I say that, what I mean is, utilize baker's racks. We have, I don't even know now, 4 or 5 or 6 baker's racks downstairs. I should know these numbers. And the cool thing about that is that I can have that baker's rack with either, 24, 19 quarts to raise out, 2 months to 6 months for the crested geckos. And I can put them in these 19 quarts, but I can wheel that baker's rack all over the place downstairs. So I can put it really in front of a breeding enclosure. We have shoe boxes, these little shoe boxes, which are about, I don't even know, 8, 12 quarts. So we have a 6 quart for the babies, and after they're about a month old, and I'm managing them, watching it, then they go into the shoe boxes, and after a couple of months in the shoe boxes, then they go over to the 19 quarts. So kind of, managing their growth progression that way. But baker's racks, and take out the middle shelves and just stack up the enclosures that way. The PVC enclosures where they have the pullouts. We've been doing this for 20 some years. So I've made probably about 30 racks, melamine, plywood, simple shelves, and you can do things like that where you can just pull out the tubs, for babies and utilize your space that way. You just have to kind of have a floor plan. You have to kind of plan out where you can move animals. I think the baker's rack is one of the key things that helped us utilize more space downstairs. One thing that you want to avoid, though, is saying, okay, this animal can get by with this minimal enclosure. Once you start doing that, then you're kind of setting the precedence, and you're just going in the wrong direction. You want to give these animals, especially when they're growing out, you want to give them lots and lots of space and keep moving them up to a bigger enclosure. What else can I say about that? Don't start moving animals into like your kitchen and bedroom, because you are done at that point, because it just means that you're way over where you should be.
All my animals are in the basement right now, but I notice as I'm doing my animal care chores each day, there's a bunch of times that I have to go back upstairs to get something, and I hate that.
Yes.
And so I'm in the process of maybe, like, I haven't actually made a list of every single detailed chore, but I think I want to do that so I can identify like cutting out inefficiencies, so I'm not always backtracking, stuff like that.
Oh my gosh, yes. So when you're working with, so we've expanded this last week, in fact. I had a fish stand here with 20 different fish tanks on it, and I took them down because I just didn't have time for fish anymore. I hate that. And I'm going to miss them every single day. But now it's a gecko rack, and every single day that I have to walk downstairs to get calcium supplements
Okay.
or a food dish, I'm not just going to bring up one, I'm going to bring up two or whatever I need. And then I have a little, cheapy Walmart $12 drawer thing. And I'll just throw extra supplies up there because I know that I don't want to keep walking back and forth and doing that. Another thing is consistency. Now, if you, and you know this probably way better than I do, but if you, and I'm the worst person with consistency because I have all these rare geckos that have different requirements and everything, but if you can keep everything consistent, I am good. I am good with having the food dish here, having the water dish here, so that when I open an enclosure, I don't even, I'm thinking of, the, so many things way off. I'm thinking of the 12 Supreme Days of Christmas next year, and I'm literally opening and food and water. Hopefully I don't do that opposite and moving on to the next enclosure. When I'm doing multiple, when I'm in that mode of feeding and watering, I'm just boom, 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 boom. And then, like I said before, there's days where I just go down and I look at and I hold and I might move around and things like that. But if you can get everything consistent in a pattern, that helps so much. Consistency. That's the word of the whole podcast here.
Nice. For my listeners, and you would know this, Wally, just from observation, dart frogs are probably the amphibian that you can standardize the most because you can keep tons of different morphs and species in the same size tank. So you could choose one brand or one style or one size tank, figure it out for your shelves, fill your wall. It would look really, really organized because it would all be so standardized. And then tadpole care is and froglet rearing. It would be very similar to like having a wall of crested geckos, egg boxes, juvenile grow outs. I have a big hodgepodge collection right now. I have newts, I have toads, I have tree frogs, I have mantellas, I even have crested geckos. And so things are a little less organized than I want them to be. But I'm working on it. I'm getting there. My next question for you.
Yeah.
If I was asking you how to be a ball python breeder, then you would tell me how important it is that I raise my own rodents as a good, consistent source of food and to save some money. But you and I keep insect eating animals. So tell me what insects do you buy? What insects do you culture? And how do you manage that task?
Another great question. Again, keeping fish, I realized that at least a third of my time was managing live foods, either brine shrimp or, raising, I hate to say it, but raising guppies to feed other fish-eating animals. And that was a third of my time. That's not going to be the case with geckos. It's more than that now. It's way more than that for feeders. So you could do this a couple of ways. You could raise your own. What does that mean? Well, you have to get the expertise in raising crickets or mealworms or dubias or fire brats or something like that. And then go through the process of killing about 3 or 4 batches of those before you kind of dial it in a little bit and then start producing your own. Oh, I produced my own. Here's my take on it though, and I'm going to show this. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. My take though is with 800 enclosures, I can't do that anymore. I can't raise my own. I raise my own dubias, so that helps a little bit. But I have found that the time that it would require to raise crickets would be so much, so much.
Yeah.
The value in raising those is not worth going out and paying, $150 for the crickets that I use every couple of weeks. That's just written into the cost of doing the hobby. I have to have these feeders shipped into me. And, the savings is then that I can plan it out and I can get 2 weeks worth of cricket feeders, or I can get 2 months. And this is what I do. I get like 40,000 mealworms at a time. And I get, I set up a quarter of them and put the other 3/4 into the refrigerator, and they stay cool and I can bring them out as I need them. That saves on bulk, purchases and also on shipping. So I have to kind of whittle down the costs as much as possible by doing things like that. If I didn't have 800 enclosures, I would raise my own mealworms. If I had 5 to 10 to 20 animals that I'm caring for, I would raise my own mealworms. I don't know if I'd do crickets, but I certainly would do dubias and fire brats and fruit flies. Absolutely. That's the one thing that is easier because it really doesn't take a whole lot of time. The other um, feeders you have to feed every other day. You know, you have to manage, look at every other day, and that just takes a lot of time. And crickets, I think it's every hour or else they'll die. So I have to utilize my time the best that I can. So I raise mealworms.
Hmm.
Um, but I raise them because, and I've said this before, I raise mealworms not on a huge volume. I certainly couldn't feed, you know, from what I'm raising, but I can feed a couple of feedings. And what that does is in the middle of summer or the middle of winter, I can't order 40,000 mealworms
Right.
because it's so cold or it's so hot. What am I going to do now? Well, I go back to my supply that sits there, 50 weeks until I absolutely have to start pulling from them because I can't get out feeders any other way. So that's the only reason I raise any of my own feeders at all, simply
Yep.
because I don't want to run out. I can't.
Right.
I can't run out.
Right. Yeah. So, listeners of the podcast, if you should take a second right now, go on over to YouTube and bookmark a recent episode that Wally did interviewing Alex. They did a deep dive, Frog Daddy deep dive into fruit flies. Really good, in depth look at raising, having high quality, high productivity fruit flies. So if you're in the dart frog world, that's your episode to go check out if you're thinking about scaling up. I have just one or two mealworm questions.
Yeah.
I just have like 2 shoe boxes of mealworms, and I have them exactly for the reason you said. If I can't get crickets in the dead of winter because it's very cold here, then my crested geckos and my toads will eat some mealworms. I haven't done a ton of research, and I'm obviously not like optimized in my care of them. Answer: what's the best way to sift and sort them? And then, do I need to be cautious about not developing an allergy to them? Because I've heard both of those things.
Excellent, excellent. I'm going to go back for just a second, real quick. So, as an interviewer, I had Alex on,
Right.
Alex Menke from Frog Daddy. So, who in their right mind, as an interviewer in this hobby, would have Alex, like one of the bigger frog breeders in the market? Why would a person have him on and talk about fruit flies? So, I mentioned that to him. We're going to talk about fruit flies. And he came back and said, "Oh, sure. Yeah." Then I'm like, I'm having you on and we're talking fruit flies. What a waste of time. But it wasn't. We dug so deep into everything, single aspect. So thank you very much for mentioning that. For mealworms, you were asking about sorting.
Yep.
What was your other question? Sorting and what else?
I know that I should have a better way of sifting and sorting them so they actually produce better. And then my other question was, I've heard, but I've never really researched, that people can develop an allergy.
Yes, 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 yes. I'm going to talk about that one first.
Okay.
I remember sorting. I'm going to tell the story real quick with mealworms. I had a good close friend when I started off out with this hobby that was raising leopard geckos, and he shifted over to crickets. Jason, you should do mealworms. Yeah, I did, and I can't anymore. Why can't you? I developed an allergy. Well, you can wear a mask. He came back and said, well, actually, here's what happened. I took the hour-long trip to Chicago to pick up a shipment, FedEx shipment from Chicago. And in the ride back home with the mealworms in the box, I developed such a bad allergy that I was actually bleeding and rash. And that day I said, no more. So viewers, please realize that you might get a little itchy, and I'm sniffling a little bit because I'm working with meal. It can happen to you just like that. It can develop from a little bit of an irritant to a major allergy. So be very, very careful. So what we do is I don't have any allergies to mealworms, but I do have a huge allergy to dubias. So I wear one of those pull down, not the full, Darth Vader respirator kind of masks, but I have a, white mask, but a good quality. I think they were like $35 for 6 of them.
Yeah.
It's not expensive. I can reuse them over and over again, but I'll throw that mask on and just make sure that, I'm covered that way. I just don't want to inhale because once you do that's there for a long time. Hope that covers the allergy thing. Please, if you have any concerns at all about itchiness or anything, wear gloves, wear a good mask. And if anybody
I should do
go
it
ahead.
proactive. I shouldn't wait till I feel like I'm
Yeah.
developing. I should do it proactively, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And if ever anybody wants, just message me on Facebook, Wally Kern. I have the mask that I use. I'll give you the numbers. I don't have it on hand here, but I'll give you the numbers of the mass. You can buy it from any of the home, building supply stores. Sifting. I actually did a video on sifting on the Supreme Gecko channel, a complete guide to mealworms. You can watch it there,
Okay.
but it was all based on this whole, 20-minute long, which actually I had to cut way down. 20-minute long video was based on one person asking me, hey, I've got these mealworms. I don't know how to get the mealworms away from the wheat and the dead beetles and the live beetles. I just have this mix going, consistently, perpetually.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to get the mealworms out without all this sifting and separate. The easiest way that you can do it, I'm going to give you the secret right now. Without watching that Supreme Gecko video, don't watch that. If you just want to know about sifting, what you want to do is don't use the sifters and stuff like that. There's two methods to do this. If you're bringing mealworms in like I do, what I'll do is I'll set them up. And once they come in, some will go into the freezer, oh my God, into the refrigerator. And some will go into these long sweater boxes, little plastic boxes. And I'll use them to feed out for the next 2 weeks. I kind of planted 2 weeks. And those I'll gut load with wheat and carrots. That's what I use, wheat and carrots. But I gut load just the amount that they're going to eat in 2 days. So when I come back to feed in 2 days, this is so huge.
Yeah.
And so easy to do. When I come back in 2 days to then get mealworms to feed to the geckos, there's no carrots and there's no wheat. All that I have to do is use a little sifter and pull up the mealworms, and all the frass comes out. So I don't have to do anything with it. Literally takes, 30 seconds to clean the frass out, and then I'm ready to feed. So that's if you're bringing them in. If you're raising your own, the secret is, here's the thing you don't want to watch that video for, because he's going to talk for 20 minutes to get to this point. Use your enclosure, your plastic, whatever you're keeping them in, whatever you're growing them in, and you're going to have all this wheat and other stuff in there. Take a potato and slice it thin. And then take, if you have egg carton on top, because the mealworms like to climb on egg carton, take all that stuff out of there. Try to brush all of the dead beetle carcasses to one side. And then just right on top of the wheat bran or whatever you're keeping them over, put these thin slices of the potato down. Come back in an hour with your collecting pan or pot or whatever, or deli cup or whatever, and then pick up a potato, put it over, and then just brush off that potato, because the worms will be attached and eating off of that potato. Brush, potato down. Brush. Do all the potatoes, come back in another hour, and you're going to get another huge supply. Now what you can do is, if you want, because you're going to get adults and you're going to get babies, now you can take it to the sifter, and you can, if you want the small ones, keep them in another collection pot. Now you can sift the babies out, and now you have adult mealworms and you have the babies. Or if you just want to put the babies back into the grow out, just sift over the grow out container.
Yeah, that sounds like what I would do, because again, I'm just working with 1 or 2 shoe boxes full, feeding once a week maybe. So cool.
Yes.
All right. You have a lot of geckos, but there's probably even more geckos that you don't have that maybe you want. How do you choose which species to work with? Like what goes through your head? What criteria do you use? Because you could easily just start buying up every single thing that catches your fancy, but I assume you have to show some restraint. So how do you decide what to keep and what to breed?
I have no discretion. I have no boundaries. I cross over the boundaries every single. No,
nice.
Seriously, I had asked this to one of the bigger breeders of geckos, kind of a very similar question. Yeah. What's your dream gecko? What's the guy? And he came back and said, this is stuck so hard up here. He came back and said, well, I don't have one right now, because what that would mean, Wally, is that if I got that gecko, I have to take one of my geckos currently and move them out of the collection, because I don't have time. I don't have resources. Resources are limited, and I just would not have the time to work on more geckos. So right now I can't. Now it might happen in the future, but that means that I have to plan first, and then I can bring in the gecko. I don't have that control. I have a little bit of that control. It was a very, very valuable point that he made, and I try to follow that as much as possible. So what initiates bringing in another gecko or type of gecko or whatever? I have my favorites. I have my favorite genuses, just like in frogs. There's certain, and I wish I knew the names better, but
that's right.
The little thumbnails. Maybe somebody wants to specialize in the thumbnails. Then they might want to get the newest and most colorful new thumbnail. And that's kind of the same with the geckos too. I specialize in species, a genus called Periodora. So if there was a Periodora that I've not worked with or I haven't worked with in a long time, if it came on the market, I would have no hesitation because I do have several enclosures empty right now. I think that's one of the keys is you have to have something ready and prepared, bioactive, ready to go. So I really wouldn't, seriously, I wouldn't have any discretion in getting one of those geckos. But that also is from a lot of experience and research, years of research in that gecko and knowing that once I get it in, I would know how to take care of it.
It already is your niche, and you're already, like you said, totally set up to care for that its care parameters would easily be met because you already have other similar things to put it right next to. Yeah.
Right on. Exactly. That's exactly it. Other than that, I sometimes look at the market and what's hot, but really, I know personally, if I went out and got something because it's hot in the market and everybody wants this, and I did not have the passion for that animal, I would have it for 2 years and I would get rid of it anyway.
Yeah.
So I try not to go with things that are more market driven than my passion driven. And my passion is I feel strongly if I have a passion for something, then through social media, I can share that passion and I can generate more interest in an animal that maybe there wasn't. I'm going to take Periodora picked. I mean, 4 or 5 years ago, you'd see one once in a while on marketplaces and everything, but now and I hope I'm a little bit of that. They're more popular because of the different colors and patterns and, and easy to care for and blah, blah, blah. But I share that passion. I'm hoping that maybe the market has caught up with some of that passion and they're going, these are pretty cool animals. So, but it would have to be something with special breeding, behaviors, special colors, something different about it that would really have to, it's not about, oh, there's an animal, I'm going to go ahead and buy it.
Yep. Yeah. So my interest is work with what you're passionate about. It just seems there's so many amphibians that I'm passionate about that'll keep me busy forever. And so my limiting factors are what would fit in this room, as far as temperature sensitivity, like that.
Yeah.
There's some types of tree frogs like it really, really hot, and that's not what I can provide. I'm going to choose not to work with them. But some temperate tree frogs or some toads, if there's another species out there that I like, they would fit in here just fine. There's space for them. There's parameters. So I'd be happy to work with them.
Perfect. Yeah. Yes.
All right. Different question here.
Yeah.
Hidden expenses. Do you have any advice? You can quickly and easily figure out that, like, well, I'm going to need to buy animals, enclosures, and food. But beyond that, what are some hidden expenses to breeding and selling and having a large collection that people overlook?
Yeah. I'm in my mind, I'm kind of going through some of this. So if you're raising animals to breed, I think the very first thing that you want to start thinking about is shows, reptile shows.
Mm-hmm.
So now that's some kind of hidden, everybody knows about, business cards and a tablecloth and maybe even know about a banner or sign up, but you're probably not thinking through, you're going to go through a bunch of paper towels. You're going to go through a bunch of signage, little signs on the table. You're going to go through a bunch of deli cups. You're going to go through a bunch of stickers. So nickel and dime, but it adds up fairly quickly. So think about a reptile show and think about how to do that. But doing your first reptile show doesn't mean that you have to have everything. Get good business cards, get a good tablecloth, and display your animals nice and clean and neatly to go. And then as you're making a little bit of sheer, sink that money into a nice banner, sink the money into, better signage, things like that.
Yep.
But it adds up. From the experience downstairs, some of the expenses that we incur, and it's like, I've got to pay for that again. Sand, jungle mix, any of the substrates, because we don't just do, again, we have many enclosures with bioactive and they just go and go and go. But a lot of our enclosures are breeder setups with maybe sand. So, I can spot clean, then do a deep clean, every month or every 2 months, a deep clean. But eventually, once a year, I have to throw that sand out. You just can't take it anywhere, too much. And you can't do a bioactive sand. So now I've got to go to Amazon. I've got to buy, a pallet of sand,
Yeah.
a lot of jungle mix. And that's something that, you don't think about. You don't, unless you're doing, unless you're geeky like me and you're doing spreadsheets, it's just an expense that kind of can disappear in the background
Mhm.
and then creep up to you and say, oh my gosh, I've got to spend $100 on sand or whatever. Trying to think of other expenses. My gosh, lighting,
Yep.
we're at the point where, we're raising a lot of animals and putting UV light on, and every year, or sooner, every couple of months, it seems like now, we've got to go out there and buy, new tubes or whatever for lighting. You have a light that goes down. I can't fix this, so now I've got to go buy. So the one thing that you can do with expenses like this
Mhm.
is bulk up. Don't just buy a light, buy 6 lights.
Yeah.
You can't do that with our Arcadia, $100 light. But if you're just buying, strip lights, buy a 6 pack instead of buying one. If you're buying jungle mix, instead of buying a quart or 6 quarts, buy, a bag of 27. Buy 5 of them and get a discount on the bulk buy. So you try to bulk up a little bit on that to save a few dollars here or there.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially when you have to pay shipping on things. Best
Yes.
best to buy
Yeah,
it once and pay shipping once.
absolutely.
This is sort of small business 101, but what do you do to keep track of your expenses? How do you make sure you do a good job keeping track of all these things you're spending money on?
I have a shoebox, and once a year, I take it to the tax guy. And no, I don't. I'm actually, that's kind of a fun part. Oh my God, I'm so
That's fun
nerdy.
to you?
That is fun to me. It is fun because I can kind of track that and I can do the comparisons and
Yeah.
analysis. I'm an IT guy. I'm an old IT guy, so that is kind of interesting to me. The best thing that you can do is you can grab a spreadsheet and just categorize. I don't categorize to lights and deli cups. I categorize to shipping supplies, to facility accounts,
Hmm.
to the animals. I do want to track down to the different types of animals that we mostly sell. The top 85%. The others just go into other gecko. But I'll do a spreadsheet. I'll have income and I'll have expense, and I'll have the same line items on 12 other tabs or other sheets for January, February through December. And I track it that way. So when I get I don't go in every single day and record my income and expenses.
Right.
I'm messy. I have I literally have 2 or 3 receipts sitting over here that have to go in, but I'm organized to the point where it's a organized mess where I know where the things are. So, I'll utilize my batch time and I'll go through, once a week or so. I'll grab all the income and expenses and then I'll just type them into the Excel spreadsheet. So, this is the time of the year. My wife says, okay, we need to go run the taxes through. So I can literally in 2 minutes, I can go click, PDF. Here you go. Let's go do taxes. And that makes it so much easier than trying to find everything, at the end of the year when you're ready to do taxes. If you don't want to spend the money on something like a Quicken or one of the
Yeah.
other, a Rocket or whatever, just create a small spreadsheet. If anybody has any questions about that, I have a spreadsheet that I can share with you that it's good to go right from the beginning, and you can change the items and call it whatever you want, and you can start using it within 10
Yep.
minutes.
Cool. I don't want to delve into the world of giving anyone tax advice because we'll leave that to the professionals. But do you recommend if you're if you're moving several, 20, 30 or $1,000 or more worth of animals, do you recommend doing it through an LLC and having a separate bank account, or do you have an opinion on how people should handle that?
I have a huge opinion. So I do consultations on reptile care, gecko care, and social media and business,
Yeah.
and especially reptile shows and business. I had one just recently, exactly that question. Do I need an LLC? How do I go about it? So I asked, how big are you? Well, we do, 3 reptile shows a year, and we're probably around the $2,000 or $3,000 range of sales. And don't do an LLC. It takes so much time, and now you have to pay for the LLC, and you also have to pay yearly. There's yearly costs for an LLC. I didn't have an LLC until about probably 7 or 8 years ago. So I ran for 15 years without an LLC. Why would you do that, Wally? Because there's really no risk. There's no risk. There's no tax advantage whatsoever.
Yeah.
The only thing is that you get to put LLC in with professional. I'd never ever, change any of my names to LLC. But also you have LLC, limited liability. You have less liability, and this was the big thing. You have less liability to your personal income through an LLC. If your gecko, your 2-inch gecko takes off somebody's fingernail, it's limited liability.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's the main reason why we did that. So no, delay it until it's almost painful that you don't have an LLC, which,
Gotcha.
at that point it was like, yeah, we've got to have an LLC.
Yeah, great. All right.
Good question.
Your analysis of your business, do you aim for a certain profit margin? Like, do you try to keep overhead and profit margin at a certain place? And you don't have to share your personal data with us,
No.
but if you were giving someone if you just needed to point me in a direction of how I should be thinking about expenses versus income and the percentages that the two take up, what do you think is a healthy number?
I get a question every 3 or 4 days. What's my gecko worth? I don't share prices. I don't say your gecko is worth $125. I don't do that because there's so many factors involved with, are you selling locally? Are you selling nationwide? Are you selling on an app? Then you have to consider that as part of the so there's so many factors. Is it a baby? Is it an adult? So from a business standpoint, margin is tricky. But I can give you a really simple answer, and then I can give you the answer that will take 2.5 hours to go through. I'm going to give you the simple. No one wants to hear that. The simple answer is try, shoot for 50%. So, double your costs. So if you can do an analysis on your cost to raise, have 10 breeder female crested geckos and raise up 100 or 200 babies. And if you can do that cost and then add in the cost of doing shows or your selling app, it's so hard not to name brands, but you can put in that cost and a couple of the other costs and you can get to a certain point. Then you start going backwards, reverse engineering back out to, okay, if this is my cost, then here's where I want to end up every year. I want to double that. And then now I've got to go back through and define, each baby. If it's 100 babies, it's pretty simple math to just go back and sell. I've got to sell every single baby at this cost, this price. That's the easiest way. But then you get into these animals are super hot. So now I'm going to triple my, cost. These animals, these are kind of hard to move. So I might just up it 25%. These items on my page, I have on my page, my store, just to get people in here. So I'm going to sell them for just about my cost, but I'm hoping that they'll see these items and they'll buy. I'm going to take an example. We sell isopods in our store. I sell leaves because my son goes out and collects leaves and throws them in black bags in our garage. So it's like a no cost because you're going to eat only if you go out and get me 20 bags. So, it's a no cost. So I can sell the leaves for like nothing. But my hope is that on the store, somebody will buy a bag of leaves because they're so cheap and then go, no shipping. I'll just buy some isopods because I'm paying shipping one time. So the profit margin is kind of a tricky thing per item. I would say generally in what we're doing, if a business can shoot for doubling the cost, so a profit margin of 2 times what your cost is, then I think you're fine.
Yep. Okay. That's great. Yeah. Just a ballpark to aim towards. That's helpful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And you have experience, and I value your opinion on that because you've looked at your own numbers for years. And if you say like that's a good place to aim for, then I think it's reasonable. You know the term snake math? Have you ever heard that term?
I have not.
I've heard it kicked around as like when a new ball python breeder starts sitting down with a pen and a paper and mapping out how rich they're going to get breeding the next morph ball python. I know I can fall into that big time. You can easily be like, oh, you know what? I'm going to get some White's tree frogs because they sell for $40 to $80 each. So $80 each. And they make between 200 and 1,000 babies. So 1,000 babies, $80 times 1,000 babies, I'm going to get rich. How do you make sure you're being realistic and not getting carried away when you're sort of planning on paper what might be possible?
Make math. Number one, maybe I'm unique. I don't know. Maybe I'm different. Maybe I'm kind of way off in left field, but I can't remember the last time I bought an animal because of a financial reason to buy the animal. Number two, I'm going to go back to the spreadsheet, the budgeting.
Yeah.
So I picked up some animals last year and, I'm going to put them together the first time, this spring, and I hope to get some babies. They're not in my equation for budgeting.
Okay.
I don't include them at all, simply because if I get babies and I sell some babies, score. I don't know, or I might be getting babies and I might be holding them back, which means no sales at all. So I'm kind of different in that, again, I'm looking at animals from my personal passion of raising the animals. And number two, I don't factor that in, and I don't set my expectations. I'm so conservative. I don't ever want to say I'm going to make, $10,000 on this gecko and then come in at nothing, or 1,000 or 2,000. I'd rather so much. I'm kind of strange this way. I'd rather record zero and then make $10,000 so that my bottom line, so I could go up to my bottom line and say, look how good I did.
It looks better than expected. Yeah.
I look so good.
Nice. Good. Yeah. I think reining in realistic expectations is something we all got to do.
And if you don't, you're going to be so disappointed. Maybe not all the time. And from a budgeting standpoint, that's probably the worst thing that I could be doing, is not accounting for some of the income that could be generated. But my expectations is zero. So I'm maybe going to be pleasantly surprised rather than be far disappointed because something didn't come in. And now, self-doubt, doubt about the industry, doubt about the hobby, doubt about my decision-making with these animals.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, what should I do? I'm done.
Right. You already mentioned that I think you recommend having a diverse stream of places to market to. So online sales, expos, apps, maybe the auctioning apps, etc. So we'll take it that your advice is to diversify and not necessarily, and maybe if you discover one does way better than the others, then you can focus on it. But no matter how you're selling, do you think it's important for people to have some sort of online presence nowadays?
Can I just leave it at that?
Sure.
Oh my gosh, I can't express how important it is. And when I see people saying, well, I'm not an Instagram person, I'm not a YouTube person, I don't like to post on Facebook, then set your expectations.
Yeah.
Accordingly. If you're not promoting, there is no such thing. We could do, whiskey, and there's a certain marketing plan for whiskey, and we could do car sales. There's certain marketing plan for car sales. But what we're dealing with is more of an emotion, and there are emotions as well. But we're dealing with an emotion, something that I really enjoy this animal, the company of the animal, the appearance of the animal. So we have to share that. We have to share our passion on that. And I think that if you don't, how are people going to see you? How are they going to know? Well, I'm going to have the best animals on. That's super cool. But if you don't post a pretty picture once in a while, I recently did a video more trying to promote my friend that does these watering devices for feeder insects. And I posted it, and I had fire brats feeding, little tiny feeding. And they look like silverfish, but they're hot. They require hot, and they're great for babies. Anyways, I posted this video and said, this is watering devices, the bee's knees or something, and all these fire brats. And I sold out of fire brats within a week.
Wow.
And before that, I'd say for the previous maybe 2 or 3 months, we'd sold 2 or 3 cultures, but I've got boxes and boxes downstairs of fire brats that are going out today. So I think doing something like that. But what you can't do is I feel, in my opinion, what you can't do is post on social media and say, look at my animals, they're for sale. You should buy these animals. You've got to take the sales out of it and make it more emotional. You have to think about why people would buy. Are they going to buy because you just posted a picture of your crested gecko or whatever? They're going to buy because they have a need or they get some excitement from that. And that's why they're, so you have to focus your, I hate to say it like this, but you have to focus your marketing because a
Yeah.
lot of times that's what it is. And I'll post pictures of the family and stuff like that. But sometimes it's all about marketing, and you have to post pictures or videos to sell your animals. But don't be using the word sales or price or
Sure.
this is the best thing. Do it, in a more emotional and a need factor. Do you have a male like this? This female is really looking for, you know, uh, sugar daddy. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, what I've noticed about you in particular, you said this already, but you're sharing it's marketing slash sharing your passion. They're kind of one and the same. And when it comes across as sincere, I imagine that leads to trust
Yes.
from the customer. And I think of you, I think of the Pictus geckos. And that's something you work with, that's something you're known for. I imagine it's something you sell a lot of, but I really think it's because of your enthusiasm for them online in the online community and all the different social medias and YouTube. I think that has something to do with why they're popular. So essentially, you sharing your passion about them markets the geckos for you.
I think you're right. And I think that holds true. We're talking about social media, but it also holds so much value at reptile shows
Okay.
as well.
Yep.
I can't sell something on the table that I don't, 100% believe in and have a passion for. But I tell you what, to see a family walk up and do those are reptiles and they're icky and they feel, and then you know, after 10 or 15 minutes, do you want to just touch? Let's talk, 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 talk. Let me share the passion. Do you just want to talk? Here, I'm going to hold it like this, and you can just touch the tail, just feel the tail. Oh my gosh, that wasn't too bad. And then mom and dad, that's the kids. Oh, that's pretty cool. And then mom and dad are still sitting, standing 2 feet away. Mom, you don't have to, but if you would like to, I'll hold it right here. If you want to just, and now their kids have already touched the tail,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
they kind so, and I just, oh, that's not what I expected. Oh my gosh, that's such a win. So, it's social media, but it's also, reptile shows. It's so important to share, number one, share your passion, but make that connection with your, I hate to say customers, but make that connection with other potential hobbyists or hobbyists.
Yep. I have a little tangent about this topic, though,
Yeah.
about the importance of it's sort of my appeal to people to have some level of online presence. And it's really as an antidote to scamming, because one thing I've seen over and over and over again, I work with newts, and there's just not a lot of people breeding and selling newts. But sure enough, every couple weeks, someone will join a newt Facebook group and post hey, how do I find these? Does anyone have these for sale? Because, like I said, they're not widely available, commonly available. And as soon as you post that, I'm looking for this, I want this, their inbox fills up with scammers. People saying, oh, I have that, I'll sell it to you, no problem. And all these scammers, they either take just one or two stolen photos or change their profile picture to try to indicate that they have something. But if they're not a known person in the hobby, it's too risky to buy from them. So if you do actually have animals for sale, have a profile on an app, have a Instagram page with a multi-year history of posts showing that you're legit. You don't just have one picture of only the animal they're asking for and 2 followers. That's sketchy. That indicates that you're probably a scammer. And so for the sake of all these new people, I think everyone selling animals should have an online footprint of some sort.
You think people still will get something like that and go, oh, that looks like a good deal, or oh, that looks like a cool animal. Let me go ahead and buy it without doing any simple 1 minute research on the person. Do you think that still happens in the hobby?
Every now and then, because it's something so rare, and it's oh, maybe I did find it. Oh, they said they weren't going to post it, but they are willing to let go of 2 holdbacks. So here is my only chance to get this animal. And so I think not everyone. I think most people are pretty keen to online scams, but it happens every now and then. So
That very first thing I do with, It's basic as friend requests. The very first thing that I do is I go to their page and I see if they have interactions, if they have a lot of, not a lot of posts, but posts, regular
Yep.
posts. I look at their friend list. Oh, 7 friends. Sounds kind of fishy to me. So I'll do that. And if I get a friend request, I'll hate saying this, but I delete it right away if I don't feel like they're a legitimate, keeper.
Mm-hmm.
I think you have to. You
Yep.
have to do some filtering out if you can like that.
Yep. What's make your appeal or your opinion on what level of customer service should we as breeders offer? Like, what should be sort of like the industry standard? Like, should customers expect that you'll spend hours and hours and hours explaining things? Should customers expect the sheer opposite, where it's like, I'm too busy breeding animals, either give me money or shut up? Or where's obviously there has to be like a middle space. So what's like an achievable but high quality level of customer service that you think we can all bring to the table?
Yep. I think it's not based on the industry. I don't think it's based on the customer. I think it's based on the breeder and what their expectations are. If you expect to have minimal interactions, then adjust your expectations for sales immediately. If you're going to spend all day on social media, you're going to get sales, but that means that you're not going to work with your animals. And that means that you're not going to be doing other things as well. So set your expectations. I kind of balance that. And I literally started doing YouTube 17 years ago for that purpose. Oh, I'll create a YouTube and then I never have to answer another care question ever again. And that's not me. It's still not me.
Yeah.
So I'll get questions. How do I take care of helmeted geckos? And the very first thought is, let me just share the link. And I'll do that. Okay, here's a care video on helmeted geckos, but also let me explain some of the kind of gotchas, and let me give you a couple of tricks to do this. So that never worked out. I could never just push out here. Just look at this care guide. Look at this YouTube video. So how I've set it up is, you talk about, your interactions with customers. I have a customer that started looking at some geckos probably about 2 weeks ago. This is a random, kind of thing. And I'll say that we've probably gone back and forth 200 times with messages ish.
Yep.
And they just purchased. Cool. Would I have at some point stopped the interaction and said, listen, do the thing or get off the pot? I'd know.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. That's just me. That's not what I couldn't walk away from something like that and say, yeah, that was the right business move to do. It's just not me. But it is for some people, and I understand that, and I don't judge at all, but just set your expectations that minimal what you should be doing with interactions like this is, number one, realize that 90% of the people that are asking questions based off of one of the sales brand sites probably will never buy from you. Don't get upset. Don't get upset. Just realize that. And try to, treat them just like a beginner, because number two, they could buy something from you. So don't treat them like just another, tire kicker. Do the thank you very much. Here's some information. Let me know if you have any questions. Here's a link to my store page, or here's a link to how to contact me more directly, or the animal for sale. Excuse me. And then, continue that conversation back and forth until they don't have any more questions. And if you don't hear from them for a couple days, here's a key too. Don't get all, upset. Message back and say, hey, were there any other questions that I can answer for you? What other questions did you have about this animal? And if you don't hear something back, drop it and move on.
Yeah.
Don't get upset. Just drop it and move on. And because your time is going to be more valuable somewhere else, and you're going to set the wrong impression for your business if you come back and say, hey, I messaged you and you never messaged me back. That's not good manners, and that was rude. That doesn't help anything. Just move on.
Yep.
Boom. Ask the question, no reply, move on. But from somebody that keeps asking good questions, my feeling is keep it up if you can, if you have the time, and answer those questions, because they might be somebody that just doesn't know. Now, if I get a question about what's the care for a leopard gecko, I'll go to ChatGPT. Oh, I hate admitting this now, but if I get something so doggone general, I almost used a bad word there, I'll go to ChatGPT and I'll say, what's the cure for leopard geckos? And I'll completely copy that whole response, and I'll copy it and paste it into, that question. That I feel is, gosh, you could have taken 2 more seconds and done exactly what I did.
Yep. Yeah, I've found I don't feel like customers have asked anything of me that's not reasonable, but I
Okay.
do link care sheets often. If they ask a question or they give any sort of indication that they're new to this, I just try to kindly and politely be like, "Hey, I have a care sheet on my website. Here's a link." And then I always say just what you said. After you read that, let me know if you have any other questions. Cuz that way it doesn't come across as like accusative, like you didn't do your job or you should know this or so. And honestly, doing that with the hundreds and hundreds of DMs that I've answered, I don't feel like people have demanded too much more of me than that. So it's good.
Outstanding.
Your involvement in the reptile community goes beyond just what you have to do to market yourself or what you have to do as like a profit motivation. You're involved broader than that, supporting and giving of yourself to the community. How and why do you think it's important to invest in like the broad reptile community?
I mentioned earlier, you came up with a question that I've never been asked before. This is probably the most difficult question I've been asked
All right.
in any review, simply because I don't have a good answer other than I don't sound so corny here, but I feel
Right.
like it's my responsibility. People have given, uh, I'm paying it forward.
Yeah.
People have given me such good advice. Um, I remember starting out when there wasn't internet. Well, there was internet, but it was all forum based. So, back and forth in forums and posts and everything, no Facebook or anything like that. And as a beginner, I asked a lot of questions on these forums and I was kind of shy and I didn't want to call people and questions. And I had so many good people answering those questions.
Yeah.
At this point, I use them as an example and say, at some point, I wanted to be like those people and answer these questions. And now, I kind of feel like that's my role. It is, but it's not, for other people that realize that, time is an essence and time is limited. That's maybe not a good answer because people don't have a lot of time to go out and say, well, your crested gecko isn't breeding because of this and typing. For me, I feel like that's what I need to do. Now, having said that, I have also realized from my health standpoint, I've got to stay away from some groups that are anything that you say is going to be looked at from an opposite angle.
Yeah.
If somebody messages me, I'll answer that question 100%. If I see something wrong on Facebook, I still feel like, I have to go out and say, from my experience, from making many mistakes like this, just like this, I feel like here's a good answer for you. So that's why I do it.
Yep.
Number two, I think that people should do it anyways to get their name out there. There's a certain quality, there's a certain impact, there's a certain advantage, there's a certain benefit from being the subject matter expert in some of these. And now you've kind of, and again, not why I do it, but now you've kind of risen a little bit. And I trust this, just like you'd said before, I trust this person to answer the question. And if you're doing it in a kind and respectful way, I think that instead of writing, you dummy, you could have gone to Gecko or Google for this. If you do it in a kind and respectful way on social media, I think that you gain a point or two every interaction for, being that subject matter expert.
Yeah. The time that you spend online in the community, you're a generous person and you're positive. Some people who are also generous and positive end up getting burnt out because of negativity and they just give up and they're like, I can still be involved in this hobby. I'll still maybe private message my 2 or 3 friends. But as far as general involvement in the online community, there's too many negative Nancy's out there. I just give up on it completely. How have you managed to not sort of burn out and give up like that?
Hard, because I know offhand, I can think of 5 people just immediately that have messaged me and said, yeah, I don't reply to messages anymore at all on Facebook. I don't reply to messages, questions like that. I actually stood in front of a big time reptile person at a show and said, you're so knowledgeable in this hobby and you're so kind and you're doing so many other good things. How do you handle messages that are kind of, basic? And he said, I don't answer them. So, oh my gosh. That was really surprising, but I can count on immediately 5 different people that just don't go on social media and answer anything anymore because they might have been burnt once in the past. I said, I'm done. I'm not going to spend the time that people are going to treat. And that's the problem sometimes with social media. What keeps me going is, and again, I sound so corny here, but one good reply makes up for 100 different bad replies. One person that comes back and says, hey, 6 months ago, you helped me understand how to find Peridora picked eggs. I wasn't finding any before. I wasn't in. Oh, good example. And this is real life. I've been working with this animal for 2 years, and I've not been getting any babies. And 6 months ago, you messaged me and said, what you need to do is these 2 changes. I did those, and now I'm getting babies. Winner, winner.
Nice.
And that will cover a year's worth of bad comments. Wally, you don't know what you're doing. That's not what I read on Facebook. You don't know what you're, whatever. I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good with that because that other person said that I helped them. So that's what keeps me going.
Right on. Yeah, that's helpful to know. And I ask not because, all of us need to discern for ourselves if time on social media is time well spent. And if it doesn't put you in a positive headspace, it's not good for your mental health, then by all means, it's okay to step back from it.
Yes.
But I just wanted to know, I had noticed about you that like for years, you're consistently present there. And so as like a positive influence, so I wanted to know how you did that.
Thank you.
On a different podcast, Andrew Huberman is a health and wellness podcaster. And I recently heard him make an observation that was pretty good. He said, online drama gives us an illusion that something important is happening. He was using that to explain, why does it suck us in sometimes? Like, why do we have this like visceral reaction? Like, I need to respond angrily to something. Dramatic, emotional language, accusing people of things, not talking about nuance and gray area, but like, it's all black and white. It has to be this way or that. It tricks us. Literally, like the part of our brain, he was, he's like a brain scientist. The part of our brain that perceives threat and injustice gets indulged with a little dopamine hit when we get outraged about something. And all of us are susceptible to it.
Yes.
And we're all sort of like learning how to be humans when we're constantly connected on social media. I just want to encourage people, like this has been, like you said, I've received so much from other people in this hobby. Great advice, encouragement, knowledge, tips, deals on animals. I've received so much through the community related to the frog hobby that I am also motivated to pay it forward. So for anyone out there listening, if you just need that encouragement to, ignore the haters, brush the negativity off your shoulder, and just keep investing in the online and in-person herp community, go ahead and do it. Yes. That wraps up all my questions for you, Wally. Where can people find Supreme Gecko online? There's a couple different places they could look, huh?
I'm going to take the next hour of your show
make a list
to get. I've got a list here. Let me just go ahead and start reading. You can find me anywhere. Instagram, unfortunately, is my least favorite platform. I just send half the viewers somewhere else. Instagram is my least favorite. It's hard to interact on Instagram. Facebook is my favorite. I'm always on YouTube. If I post a video and you ask me a question within one day, I will 99.9% of the time reply back to you, unless we have something, show or something like that going on. Oh my gosh, all over the place. I don't dance. Maybe you'll see me dance at some point, but I don't, right now I'm not dancing on TikTok, but you can find me on TikTok as well. The best place to contact me is through my email, wallykern@gmail.com, or especially on a direct message, private message on Facebook, Wally Kern. That's the best place. And generally I'm, again, responding within, my wife will say minutes because I'm always on Facebook, but I'll say within an hour or at the most a day.
All right. If someone listened to this whole podcast and they're thinking about their hobby in more business terms and they wanted to have a consultation call with you, how do they go about finding your Buy Me a Coffee program?
Buy Me a Coffee Supreme Gecko. It's as easy as that. And you can set up a quick question. You can set up a 10-minute consultation. You can set up a half hour, and you can set up an hour. And unfortunately, if you set up a half hour, it's going to be an hour. And if you set up an hour, it's going to be 2 hours. So kind of plan your day accordingly.
Do you give any advice, someone who's going to schedule consultation conversation with you. Did you give them any advice on how to prepare well for that?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. The best thing that you can do is kind of think through your problem or where you want to be, your goal. In a short term, I've had people say, well, I want to understand how I can start raising geckos and doing shows and have an online presence. And also, what platform should I sell my animals and how do I build a website? Kind of narrow it down to maybe something that can actually,
Yeah,
literally cover in a half hour or an hour. Let's narrow down your goal. Let's narrow down your problem and kind of put down your problem and it's obviously email it to me or message me, but also go through that and have in your mind where you want to end up after the session with. I want these questions answered. And if you can send me those questions, so
right.
half hour sessions, hour long sessions, if I get that in before, I'll spend a half hour to an hour, even before the consultation, kind of getting some notes together. I always most of the time I'll send a Word document with your questions and I'll put, a ton of solutions or links or something like that in a Word document and send that to you after the consultation.
Right on. All right. Well, I think frog people, just because Wally's known for geckos, I think if you're scaling up your hobby or business, he's a great guy to talk to. As you can tell from this podcast, easy to have a conversation with, knowledgeable and experienced. So thanks for that, Wally. Thanks so much for coming on the Frograck Podcast. I want to encourage all the listeners to subscribe to the Supreme Gecko YouTube channel. That's where I know Wally from. So link in the comment for there. And help me peer pressure Wally into keeping some amphibians. He used to have fish, so it wouldn't be that big of a stretch to get some newts in an aquarium. And I know he wants to build an addition to his house so that he can have 100 dart frog tanks after talking to Alex the other day. So we'll just put that pressure on Wally till he joins the group here.
If I did that, and believe me, I was thinking about dart frogs before I started thinking about geckos. And I realized if I got one pair and they bred,
Yep.
I would fill up. Wait, I did that for geckos.
Yep.
If I started with dart frogs right now, it would be almost impossible for me to not have 100 tanks in this house. And unless, like you said, I build upwards, it's not going to happen, unfortunately.
I believe it. All right, Wally, thank you so much for joining us. Everyone out there, please like, subscribe, and share the Frograck Podcast. Until next time, see you later.